Hi, I'm Mike Irwin of the Pig Trail Nation, and this is our first ever segment of Ask Mike, which will be on the web starting today, and we'll have this as a regular feature. All of our questions come from hogville.net, so if you want your question answered, you need to go there. If you're not already signed up, you can sign up. It's free, become a member, and then you can go into the Ask Mike forum and ask your question. So I'm going to start, first of all, with Hog 1221 from Hogville, and he wants to know, due to a very thin offensive line last year, do you expect any of the freshman offensive linemen to play this year? I suppose it's possible in some non-conference games, if they get out to a big start, maybe have a big lead in the second half, you could see some freshman offensive linemen play. I don't expect freshmen to make contributions during conference games unless you get some serious injury problems. The thing is, they've got a lot more depth along the offensive line this year, and the other thing the coaches are doing is they're splitting their scrimmaging. So they're scrimmaging on two fields at the same time, and that allows the first unit and the third unit to scrimmage, and then the second unit and the fourth unit to scrimmage. When you get that far in to your fourth offensive and defensive units, you're talking about using almost every scholarship guy you have and maybe a few walk-ons. So what that means is virtually everybody this year, at least to this point, is getting some scrimmage action in. And that will create a lot of depth and put, for instance, some of these offensive linemen in a better position if they have to come in and play if they're a true freshman. But again, I wouldn't expect to see that in SEC games, barring an injury situation that got worse. All right, let's go to what we have next. And this is from Houston Hog, H-O-U Hog. What quarterback would you select as a starter after Saturday scrimmage if both quarterbacks are determined to be even in the race? I would say if they're both even, and the coaches haven't talked about that yet, but I would say at some point, yes, you have to name a starter for the first game, and if it's even, I would probably go with Ben Hicks simply because he's got more experience and certainly more experience with Chad Morris's offense. But I don't agree with this part about you got to name a starter. It has to be cemented soon to avoid a fractured team. I don't think the team is going to be fractured because there is not a clear-cut starter. This all came about from last year when people felt like because the coaches couldn't come up with a starter through the first 3 or 4 games, they kept going back and forth between Ty Storey and Cole Kelly, that somehow was why they were having trouble. They were having trouble because neither one of those quarterbacks could win the job. Ty Storey turned the ball over too much. Cole Kelly didn't know the offense, and coaches were having a hard time deciding which one of those guys they had a better chance of winning with, and that has nothing to do with now. All right, next question from J.D. Lou. After seeing them live, limited I know, is the talent level worse, better, about where I thought it was going into this year? Talent level is up, but it's up at the bottom where the freshmen are. When you bring in 4 four-star wide receivers and 4 four-star down linemen, that's going to make your team better at critical positions. Those two positions were positions where they didn't have a lot of depth last year. And so I think this is where you're going to see a lot of the freshmen play. No, I don't think they'll start, but I think they'll be there for depth, and the talent is there. We have seen it. We've been impressed with some of these young receivers and some of those young down linemen. So the talent level is up, but it's up with the freshman class. All right, let's go to VB Mark. Which game is most likely to be the first SEC win for Coach Morris? Look, I'm going to say Ole Miss. That doesn't mean Arkansas will win that game, but this is a game, honestly, that this staff has to win, I think, because that gives you that first conference win. That would we assume at this point, make them 2-0 and set them up possibly to go 4-0, which gets you off to a great start. You don't win that game, then you got a lot of questions to answer. So I think that will be the first. Can't guarantee it, but we'll hope it is. All right, from Little Joe. In your opinion, who is a player we haven't heard a lot about that might jump up and surprise us this fall? No question about that. In my opinion, it's Sam Lloyd. He is the punter transfer from Colorado who spent his first 2 years at Vanderbilt. We've watched this guy a little bit. Now, they have kind of for whatever reason, Coach Morris has limited what we can shoot during these special teams periods, so we don't have a lot of this on video. But a lot of us have watched Sam Lloyd punt, and he can punt conventionally, and he can boom the ball 40 to 45 yards, and he's got really good hang time when he does that. We've all watched that happen, and I think that's going to be a big help this year. And then when he sort of punts rugby style, he's got the ability to kill the ball in the red zone. And he worked with Sam Irwin Hill, the former Arkansas punter, who was also a guy that learned how to kick by studying Australian rules football. That is a sport in which the guys that kick the ball in that sport very often are able to back a punt up or a kick up. And so we've all seen the value of punting the ball. Let's say you're at midfield, or maybe your opponent's 45 and you've got a punt, and you don't want to boom it out of the end zone. You want to drop it around the 5-yard line and get it to back up. This kid so far has shown the ability to do that, so I think that will be a big help. Okay. Augusta Hogg, how much involvement do you expect Coach Morris to have in the offensive play calling this year? Will he be more involved this season or continue to let Coach Craddock have leeway? Oh, I think he will do that, but he said he will be more involved. And we're not going to know a lot about that till it happens. I don't think we've asked him about play calling and scrimmages. So when we get into the first game, the second game, in the post-game situation, he's going to get asked about that, and we'll just wait and see what he says. But so far, he said that he will be more involved, so I'm going to have to assume that that's what's going to happen. Okay, this is from DeBoer. What do you see that is different thus far this season over this time a year ago? No question. The offense, the guys on the offensive side of the ball know more of Chad Morris's playbook. Last year at this time, they were talking about 25 to 30% of the playbook, very limited. I think that stayed that way most of the year, and Arkansas became very one-dimensional. It was one of the offensive problems they had. I think a lot of the opposing defenses they faced had their job made easier from the opening kickoff, the first time they faced Arkansas's offense, because looking at film of these guys, they didn't do a whole lot. So it was easier to figure out what they were going to do. This year, Chad Morris has said, after that scrimmage, we're up to about 65% of the offense. So 25 to 35% to 65%. I think that if that's accurate, I think this makes this a more multi-dimensional team, and a team harder to defend. And indeed, in Monday morning's practice, the offense, which throughout last spring, they have this thing called the belt. And if the offense does the best job in practice, the offense gets the belt. If the defense does the best job, they get the belt. It's been very rare for the offense to be awarded the belt. It certainly didn't happen a lot last spring, but it happened today on Monday. And the offensive players that came into the room after practice were very happy about that. Just one more sign that the offense is looking a lot better at this point than it did a year ago at this time. Okay, hammer down. Mike, from your experience, past or present, how would you compare the organizational style of coaches? Who of Arkansas's football coaches had the most organized practices? Who stands out to you? What stands out to you about this staff as far as attention to detail and what they do? You know, I'd go all the way back to Frank. Frank Broyles had a tremendous staff, and watching his practice and trying to remember what that was like, because that was, oh gee whiz, 44 years ago, something like that. I would say they were the most organized. Ken Hatfield had a totally different style. He ran that program pretty much by himself, ran those practices. He was the guy that organized it, but he was very well organized as well. And I would say Chad Morris is one of the more organized coaches I've covered. And a good example of that, again, is this decision which they've made in camp this year, because they've got everybody healthy when the season starts. You go ahead and scrimmage on two different fields, keep a scrimmage going, two of them at one time, and involve almost everybody out there. That is an example of being organized and taking advantage of the fact that you don't have injuries yet, so you got your full staff or full roster of players out there with you, and you can do this. Now later on, they may not be able to do that in practices, but I think it's a very smart thing to do right now, and it's just one example of how organized he is. And I believe that will do it. Yeah, I've answered about all of the questions that I can get to today, but I want to say once again that we're going to be doing this on Mondays from here on out through the football season. And again, if you want your question to be asked, you need to, if you're not already a member of hogville.net, you need to go there, sign up. It's free. It's not going to cost you any money. Join, and then go to the Ask Mike forum, and you can write down or type down on your keyboard your question, and we'll try to get an answer to it. So, enjoyed it. We'll do this again next week.